All right, welcome to another episode of Talking Ball with Pat Leonard, brought to you by my bookie, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Sal Loretta for Men, luxury menswear and tailoring in Midland Park, New Jersey, and Estate 98 Coffee. We have a special guest back on the program, Super Bowl champion, FS1 analyst, host of the Why Willie Show with JJ Williams on YouTube. He is the one and only Willie Cologne. Big Willie style. What's up? Thanks for coming back, man.
Hey, what's going on, Pat? All is well.
Great to see you. And I know I'm excited to have you here to tell people about your 11th annual Willie Cologne golf outing. That's Monday, June 23rd at Canoe Brook Country Club in Short Hills, New Jersey. Benefits the Lupus Research Alliance. Willie, why is this such a cause close to your heart? And how have you turned this into such a landmark event? It really is one of the best events of the NFL offseason every year.
I think I'm extremely fortunate. When I got to the Jets, Woody and the powers that be reached out to me because they knew, my involvement with lupus, the fact that my mother, had lupus and she's no longer with us. But when I had the platform, or when I was given the platform to really raise awareness and talk about it on a grand scale, man, I was able to join the LRA and get with Jonathan Marks and his team and really put an outing together that just wasn't about silent auctions and a money grab. It was about making this more of a culture where people can be seen, loved, and we can have a day of camaraderie. And the golf outing has been, simply more breathtaking because we've been able to impact so many people. We've been able to really make it kind of a staple on people's calendars, right? Where people say, all right, whenever the outing is, no matter what's going on in our lives, we're going to be there.
No doubt.
Solely because it has become sort of a family reunion. And I say that every year. We have so many people who come back year after year because not only are they recognizing they're doing something for a greater cause, but they genuinely love to be around Jonathan Marks and our team and everybody that we kind of keep close to us. And so it's been a blessing, man. It has, like you said, it's the 11th year. I got to credit the board, Xavier, Nadi, on and on and on. I'm messing up the name, so I apologize. But so many people have, really stepped up to the plate to make this outing grand. And I'm just, like I said, every year, I'm just a pretty face, man. There's so much work and so much hard work goes into this one day, man. The whole LRA and the team, they deserve all the credit in the world because they put boots to the ground and make it an amazing day.
No, it is a fantastic event. Please go to give.lupusresearch.org and you can find ways to donate, to sponsor the event. I think the golf by this point might all be filled up already, Willie. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, we every year, man. Sometimes it's even though I got my name on it, I have trouble getting my own foursome. Every year, I got to tell Jonathan, hold the spot for me, man. So it fills up, and it's a blessing. I call it champagne problems, and I'm at the point in my life right now where, man, you just show gratitude, and I'm just showing gratitude to the LRA, Jonathin Marks, the whole team, our whole board, the golf committee, man, because they, throughout the year, they all kind of they put in the work to make sure this thing is a go. And thank you to Canoe Brook first and foremost, man, because they allow us to come in and really plant our flag and kind of say, hey, this is your day, make it work.
Yeah, no, everybody does a first-rate job. And I'll say too, as somebody who's covered the event and also participated in the event, I think what also makes it different, like you said about the family reunion, like I know some people might hear that and say, oh, cliche or whatever. No, like the difference between how you run it, and I mean you specifically,
Yeah.
there's celebrities there, there's athletes there, but you, the face of the entire thing, all the, former NFL players, whoever else is there, the last person, quote unquote, in the room is treated just like the biggest name on the marquee. Like
Yeah.
everyone there is equal and enjoying their time as friends. And that is like a very genuine review from me of like what it feels like to be there versus usually how a lot of these events feel like, which is like gateway type events. And
Yeah.
certainly the sponsors, obviously, who support you get better access to certain things. But by and large, everybody who is there walks away feeling as big of a part of it as everyone else who's in attendance. So I give all the credit to you for that.
And I appreciate that. And I think that's always the goal for me. Yes, we are able to get athletes in the building to support me and support the cause. But a lot of those guys want to come back year after year because it's exactly what you said. It doesn't feel like, a money grab or kind of this thing to do. This feels like, hey, man, I'm with family. We're going to enjoy our time. We're going to drink. We're going to laugh. We're going to have fun. We're going to have good food. The hospitality is great. We're going to do a lot of hugging and a lot of shaking hands and kissing on each other. And like I said, for me, that the fact that people say, hey, on this day, no matter what I got going on in my life, I'm going to Willie Cologne's golf outing. That's just a win for me and the whole board and the rest of the LRA.
No doubt. All right. Like I said, give.lupusresearch.org. And speaking of credit for Big Willie and really for offensive linemen in general, shifting to some NFL talk, the NFL recently announced the creation of the Protector of the Year Award, spearheaded by Buffalo Bills tackle Deion Dawkins. And this is now going to award the top offensive lineman every year in the NFL. Willie, how overdue is this, giving the big guys some credit up front?
Man, I'm honestly genuinely surprised that this award is now here. When you talk about some of the most outstanding offensive linemen that's ever played this game and how much they impacted not only their team but the culture. I mean, I think about guys like Tony Baselli. I think about John Runyon. I think about Larry Allen. I think about the great Alan Faneca, who I held to high esteem. And the list goes on and on. It's guys who were not only Anthony Munoz, I mean, for Christ's sakes, the guys who were staples on the offensive line, but really anchors for the franchise and organization. So I think, the X and O's matter as far as execution, how well a guy does his job. But I think the award also has to embody what that guy means to his team and community. I think it should be kind of a 3-tier award, if you will, because, so many of guys who play in the trenches, their impact off the field is just as great as what they do on the field. I think about Andrew Whitworth and his community, all the stuff he's been able to do in the community with his name. I think about, Orlando Pace. I think about, so the list goes on and on. Nevertheless, man, I'm glad the award is here. I'm a little shaky on the name, Protector of the Year. Sounds kind of comic bookish a little to me. But I'm listen, you can't. The fact that we have one is good enough.
So you can tell the name was not created by an O lineman, is what you're saying.
Definitely not. Like I would have been fine with offensive lineman of the year. Like I would have been or the hard, in the trenches, something. I don't know. My creative juices aren't flowing right now, but yeah, the fact that we got an award, we're being acknowledged, and I got to say this too. I think it comes with now watching what Ben Johnson was able to do with Penei Sewell, right? I think a lot of that because when you watch the Detroit Lions and you see how this massive man who can move like a cat have multiple roles within the offense, man, it for some reason more people are looking like, offensive linemen don't just stand there and block. Like they actually are athletes. And mind you, some of the best athletes I've ever been around are offensive linemen, and because they've been able to play, they were either wrestlers, basketball players, football players, baseball players. So they're just as athletic as some of the guys who get paid to run routes, but they just have to be hefty and they're big. So nevertheless, man, I'm glad that we are getting acknowledged.
Well, to your point, maybe they can retroactively go back and give some love throughout the years to all the great O linemen who clearly, to your point, would have won the award at least once, if not multiple times.
Oh, man. There's so many guys I played with in my career that I off the top, like Marshall Yonder with Baltimore Ravens, 100%. I mean, this guy played inside and out just like me, and it was dominant. You talk about Nick Mangold, of course. You talk about Brick. You talk about, even if you look down the line to, Donald Penn. Like there's so many guys who are just dominant and kick-ass offensive linemen, man, who just year after year put in the work and never got the nod. Yeah, they made Pro Bowls, which sure is kind of like our ceiling as an offensive lineman or all pro. But when you see other guys, and just from a market stand, like guys who you think about Jamar Chase and all these receivers, valid they get all pros, but that leads to endorsement deals for a lot of these guys, right? A lot of these guys are able to kind of use that like, hey, I'm an all pro, I'm an all this, all that, my receiving yards, that kind of catapults them to now get marketing deals, they get advertisement deals. So
Right.
hopefully that's the next wave for big fellas getting this award.
Yeah, you could put it in a contract as an incentive, and that, and that you're kind of jogging my mind around a little bit of like, maybe when they announce the award, maybe you have the winner. To your point, it's not just what he does on the field, it's the whole full circle.
Yeah,
Maybe you do a top 10, the selection committee,
I'm
so a
totally
lot
fine
of
with that.
guys get their love. The selection committee, at least for now, is Jason Kelsey, Sean O'Hara, LaCharles Bentley, Orlando Pace, Will Shields, and Andrew Whitworth. So we got to get Willie Colon on the committee.
By the way,
That's what we
all qualified. All those guys were dogs at their position. Charles Bentley was actually my trainer in my last couple years in the league. I was down in O-line performance at his camp in Arizona, and he did a great job. So, but yeah, there's the award should, I guess, what I'm trying to say is warrant more. I think when you think about how many guys, when I see guys with the shoe deals and the brand endorsement, I'm like, man, like, yeah, I would love to see a big guy with a sneaker deal. You know what I mean? So that'd be great.
Great call. That's the next step. And I like that you mentioned the Lions, even though you're talking about Penei Sewell, their stud tackle, but it's a good pivot to my next question for you. Staying on O-line, Frank Ragnow, the Lions center, speaking of dogs, guy who plays through injuries, was the leader with the ball in his hands of the top NFL offense last season, 33.2 points per game. But Willie, they lose Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator and mastermind, to the head coaching vacancy with the Chicago Bears. Now the Lions lose Frank Ragnow at the front. Can they recover from this offensively and as a team? How big of a deal do you think it is that they're losing Ragnow on top of Johnson? Because at the moment, it looks like Tate Ratledge, the rookie guard they selected out of Georgia, has been taking first team snaps and OTAs. I wonder how big of an issue this is going to be for the team, because he is such a leader and a guy who really rarely comes out of the lineup.
Yeah, first, congratulations to Frank, man. He had a hell of a career. I know it was short-ended, but, for a guy who battled through injuries, it takes a toll, man, not only physically, but mentally, getting yourself up day after day and week after week to be your best and try to be your best. It wears on you. And so the fact that this man played through a multitude of injuries, battled his tail off, was really the spearhead of that offensive line. It speaks to his level of toughness and commitment to the Lions. But overall, man, I think every guy, I think he's only 29 years old. Valley, he's been to multiple Pro Bowls. I think it speaks to where we're starting to see across the board with a lot of guys. A lot of guys are starting to put their health first rather than the bag or their legacy, because at the end of the day, man, I limp around here sometimes solely because of what I did on the field, not because I'm in pain, just what my body was able to endure. And, I work out not just because of to look good in front of the mirror, because that's the only way I can stay upright and stay in shape so I can combat some of the aging issues I'm dealing with. But guys are now putting their health first. Guys are way more, I think, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine, and we were talking about culture and how, one of my biggest regrets in my career, and I know I'm pivoting off and I'll get back around, but one of the things in my career I regret was really drinking so much. I wish I would have put the bottle down a lot earlier, solely because what it does to your body on multitude, from your mental to your physical, right? It chews at you. But at the same time, I think a lot of guys during my time when we played, they were participating in those things because it was a sign of validation with the older guys in the locker room, right? If you weren't drinking or if you weren't able to have a sixer and also put in the day's work, you were kind of looked at as a softie. I think this generation is now saying, hey, that's the old way. I'm putting my health, I'm eating better, I'm sleeping, I'm doing everything I can so I can be the best on the field. And then when they're done, and it's easier for them to walk away. I think more guys are tired of looking at the old guys limp off the field. And I think a lot of guys are saying right now, hey, man, we have a chance to get our money, play as long as we feel like we want to play and move on. I think more guys are willing to that. That wasn't the case when I played. Guys were always like, hey, we want to get 10 years and plus. That was always the target. That was let's get 10 years and plus. I don't think guys are looking at it no more. I think guys are saying, hey, my body's had enough. I've done enough. I've accumulated enough. Let's see what the next chapter is. And it's it's wise to some degree. So for Frank to kind of call it quits early due to the way his body is, uh, this current state of his body, man, I think it's admirable. At the same time, man, to your point, the Lions are going to miss him because he was a leader, and he was great with golf, their communication. You could tell that offensive line with the Lions, they had a great chemistry. And sometimes chemistry isn't necessarily something that can be put together. It has to be earned. And it's only earned by playing and through repetition. And when you see the way, Panay and a lot of those guys were able to kind of, gel together, especially a team that was depleted with injuries last year, they were at least able to get into the playoffs. Valid, they lost to the Commanders, but they were still able to battle and put up some big points. So a tribute to him and that offensive line.
Thank you for that candid and honest reflection about your career and about the health side of the game. Really important stuff. I'm really grateful that you shared that. Along that same line, one other question about Ragnow I wanted to ask you was, in his announcement about his retirement on Instagram, the way he put it was, "I've tried to convince myself that I'm feeling good, but I'm not. And it's time to prioritize my health and my family's future." Did you have moments in your career, maybe later in your career, where hearing that sentence takes you back to moments where you were sitting on a training table saying, "I can do it," but in your heart you knew you couldn't, and like the football player was pushing through, but the human kind of in the background, in the back of your mind, was saying no?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, that was my last 2 years with the Jets. I was definitely in that space every day. I mean, I was sitting in meeting rooms and I would just kind of eke out my seat, and the great Brickenshaw Ferguson was like, "Hey man, you okay?" And I wasn't, but I was always raised and trained that your feelings or how you feel doesn't matter. It's about getting the job done. And I think most offensive linemen, from my era, kind of had that creed and that mantra. Like, doesn't matter how you feel mentally, doesn't matter how you feel physically. You pay you to go to work, you go to work. And so there's a lot of times where I squeaked out of bed and crawled out of bed. Where I remember limping onto the field. I remember playing a good portion of my last year uh, with the Jets before Bowles put me on IR, playing on one leg, literally one leg. I mean, if you go back to that game against the Eagles, I take a bull rush for Vinny Curry and I collapse.
Wow.
And it's because I couldn't anchor. My knee was just done. But and those are hard conversations to have with yourself. There's always that. It's cliche. You've probably heard it before. Guys are going to ride the wheels till the wheels came off. Well, I rode the brakes. my wheels had popped off a year or two ago, but I was riding on brakes. But I love football so much. I love playing out there. I love competing. And that's the hardest part about walking away from the game, is when your heart and mind is still into it, but your body's gone. And you're necessary. And I was, my last year or two, I was spending more money to get on the field than I was making on the field, if you get what I'm saying. Like dealing with doctors and therapists and trying to just being able to compete and be in the fire. I was spending more money doing that than what my paycheck was giving me. And that's when it becomes like, man, what are we really doing here? And even after, even after I was, I went on IR and I had some time at home, I was still mentally like, man, let me just take 3 months off and I can call a team. And there's some teams I was willing to call, and hopefully I can get myself in shape enough to compete. But I remember talking to my mother, and she was like, "You kind of did it all, Willie. You got a Super Bowl early. You had multiple contracts. You're home. This media thing looks like it could be a thing for you. Well, how about we start, thinking about yourself first instead of the game?" And it's still tough. Even after, I tell you what, Pat, I remember I had a conversation with Sean Merriman. We were out on Fox, and I was doing I was kind of doing an audition, and I was able to meet him. Obviously, I played against him, and we were talking, and he was like, "Man, and I think he was off the field for a while, but I remember having a brief conversation with him, and he was pretty much saying like, dog, even with everything he had going on as far as movies, TVs, commercials, everything he had going on, he still missed the game. And he said, you got to respect the grieving process. And I think I necessarily didn't understand that. When I walked away, I still felt like there's times like even this time of year with the grass being cut, the sun is hot on your back, my body still has this clock like, all right, we're about to get going for football. Like start gearing up. Like I just left the gym and I had to remind myself like, dog, you're not going back. Like you got to, you got to work for maintenance. You got to work smart. You got to work out smarter. Throwing around 85, 100-pound dumbbells, like, what are you going to do with that, right? So there's still like a rewiring that I think most football players have to go through. I damn sure am still going through it, but it's still a process, man, and it's not easy. So
Fascinating. Thank you so much. So much honesty. It's why you're the best, Willie. All right. So you won a Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a standout O lineman for the Steel City. And I have a few questions about three different teams, but they all connect back to Pittsburgh. So it's an interesting kind of thread. All right. So the first is about the Steelers themselves. What do you want to see happen with their quarterback spot? I'm sure you've talked about it a lot the last few months, let alone the last few weeks, but we have this waiting game supposedly with Rodgers. Maybe Kirk Cousins comes available. You already have the Mason Rudolphs and the Will Howards in the building. How does this shake out, Willie, so that all the questions about where is this Steelers team really going settle down and the plan looks right to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are frustrated, kind of, throwing rocks at the Steelers for even entertaining Aaron Rodgers at this point, considering that he hasn't been signed and he hasn't done anything. I think people got to realize Steelers have been around a long time. They know what they're doing. It may be unorthodox to a lot of people in reference to like, hey, you have a young quarterback in Mason Rudolph. You just drafted Will Howard. You had an opportunity to do X, Y, Z. Listen, the Steelers realize they have to be able to compete in that division. And last year, when they lost I think they lost four. They lost 4 out of their 5 games. They lost it to MVP type quality quarterbacks. And you're talking about Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. And they looked at Russell Wilson and realized, you know what? They don't have nobody on their roster like that. So they now are in a position like we have this defense that's young and competing and can fight. We have enough offensively. We just don't have that killer, that elite quarterback. Now you're saying, well, how is that Aaron Rodgers? The last 10 games with Aaron Rodgers, when he was with the Jets, he became healthier. They showed up the left side by getting Olu Fashanu there, and he started to play better. And the more he gained confidence with himself, you started to see splashes of old Aaron Rodgers. They were just, at that point, they were in the tank, and they were just finishing out the season. Yeah. My biggest concern with Aaron Rodgers is his commitment to being the best he needs to be for that team. So if he needs time in the offseason to kind of get his head together, to get aligned mentally, physically, and spiritually, fine. If that means he shows up first day of training camp like, hey, I'm here now, fine. But I think the Steelers at the same time are aware of that's the case, right? They're hiring a mercenary, right? They're hiring an old gun. And I think they're willing to lay in bed with that. And so if you look at the division with Burrow, who threw 40-plus touchdowns last year, and Lamar Jackson coming off another quality MVP season, and you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you need a quarterback that can bang against those guys. And by the way, Cleveland's a wild card. Nobody knows what Cleveland's going to be. So it's a situation where they're like, man, they want to remain competitive. They want to be able to get into the playoffs, and they want to go into the playoffs with a quarterback that compete, because one or two of those guys are going to be there in the playoffs, and they're already in your division. And so I'm not upset by it. I think the Steelers are smart. I think they know what they're doing. I think it's just a matter of what kind of Aaron Rodgers the Steelers are going to get. If they're going to get an all-in Aaron Rodgers, or somebody who's really kind of sulking because he doesn't want his legacy or his career to end the way it did in New York.
No, I think you're making a great point, which is like, to people say, like, don't overthink it. He's in a division, or they're in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. So, you need that quarterback position solved, or else not much else matters. Real other quick question on the Steelers. George Pickens out to Dallas, DK Metcalf in. Do you like that? Do you just view it as like they had a great wide receiver, now they have another great wide receiver, or how do you view that?
In reference to Dallas? Sorry,
no, Pittsburgh's decision to do that.
I think I heard Ryan Clark say this is low-hanging fruit. It was low-hanging fruit for people to judge George Pickens because of his antics or how he was perceived. And that was the reason why he was shipped off to Dallas. I looked at it from this standpoint. George Pickens and DK Metcalf are the same receiver, in my eyes. They both have ability to stretch the field. Both super athletic. From a personality standpoint and characteristic standpoint, I can't speak much to it because I've never been in the locker room with both of them, right? And I never, like, Pat, you can't believe the hype. What people say on the outside or what people perceive could be totally different from what the guy actually is. So I never brought into a lot of that. I think right now the Steelers they need more weapons. And I think that's why you see the attempt to possibly get Jonnu Smith. That's why I think there's the talks of Kyle Pitts possibly. I think there's talks of all these they just need more playmakers. I think that's why they drafted the way they drafted. And I think they realize if you do get Aaron Rodgers, man, you're going to have to get people who can get them. He likes big targets, right? And so you have DK Metcalf. He's a big target. And I think right now when you talk about what this team needs to do from a production standpoint, they need to be more explosive. Like one of the things is as great as Russell Wilson's moon balls were awesome to see, and he was scoring touchdowns, the man couldn't throw in the middle of the field. Everything was on the outside of the numbers, and he was just stretching down the field, and it was dink and dunks, and we was having explosive plays in the run game. They're going to have to get a quarterback and weapons that can really manipulate the middle of the field, and on top of that, run game. And the offensive line is going to be better, which is great. So they just need a little more weapons, and I think that'd be fun.
Shifting over, so you mentioned Russell Wilson, again, a great transition here in New York with the Giants. The Giants have basically handed him the QB1 job here in the spring, but they also have Jameis Winston on the roster, and they drafted Jackson Dart late in the first round. So it's Dart as the third QB. You still got Tommy DeVito in the mix. But I wanted to go back to Russ. Willie, having seen him with the Steelers, obviously he had early success, and then it tapered off significantly at the back end. Do you think the Giants are making a mistake by giving him the QB1 job rather than putting him in a competition with a Jameis Winston? And how ultimately do you view that as a sustainable plan for the Giants to have the kind of season that they need to have to keep this regime intact?
Well, I think it's all about what you're asking Russell to do. I think if you put on his tape last year, like I mentioned, he can still throw it deep. He still has enough mobility. The biggest issue with Russell going into Pittsburgh last year was taking unwarranted sacks. Can they really manufacture this offense where he's really getting the ball out quick, where he's able to be a lot more mobile in the pocket? I think that's when you got Russell moving with that pocket, it seemed like he started to come alive a little bit. And also getting a run game behind him and asking him not to throw the ball more than 30 times, right? I think if he gets into the high value range where he's throwing the ball multiple times and where he has to make, a lot of decisions, I think he gets himself in trouble. I think having a sufficient run game, I think they have a hellacious front seven. So if they can play behind that defense, and you talk about Hyatt, you talk about Malik Neighbors, you talk about all the guys they do have now, it's about making sure Russell is really just getting the ball out of his hands and not feeling like he has to carry that weight because he is aged. He's a 30-year-old quarterback, and he can't do it like he used to, but he can still be efficient enough. I think we was able to see that in Pittsburgh.
Still not a fan of their O-line, huh?
I don't think anybody's a fan of their offensive line. And I don't think they're a bad offensive line. I think they just need time. And hopefully Andrew Thomas is back in the fold. He's back, right? I know I'm –
Yes, he is. He's back as the left tackle. They actually, Willie, they're putting him in bubble wrap over the spring, which I don't agree with potentially, or as like a philosophy of how to keep a guy healthy. I mean, I know he's doing his work, but I feel like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you got to play football to be ready to football. So you got to get the guy.
I think that's what hurt Mekhi Becton when he was here too. They treated him with kid gloves, and when they tried to work him, it just wasn't, he just didn't turn out. A lot of conditioning for offensive lineman has to happen playing offensive line. You can do the med ball work, you can do the treadmill work, and you have to be sensitive to the injuries 100%. But sometimes conditioning happens with just you moving as an offensive lineman and doing that necessary work. So I like his game a lot, man. I think he's a big time player. I hope he's healthy enough to give it a go this season.
Do players in the locker room get bothered by, like in this situation, for example, Russell Wilson versus Jameis Winston? Like, do players prefer to see a competition in a situation like that? Does it create bad feelings if you
think it's
like
unnecessary, especially when at the end of the day, guy is going to be your number one. From my standpoint, if I'm always a fan of the team making a declaration like he's our guy right now, this is what we're going with. Let's move forward, because it eliminates the distraction, eliminates the unwarranted questions around the locker room, like who do you prefer over who? At the end of the day, it's going to be Russell, right? So I think it just adds extra drama. Now, I think if if Russell was younger, you know what I mean? Like if it was Russell Wilson in first 2 years versus Jackson Dart, yeah, you let the best man win. But Jameis and Russell been around forever. All right. Like they're both in their 30s. So with that said, you know who's the better quarterback at this moment. Let it be Russ, and let's get going. Because there are other things this team needs to pay attention to. So why
Gotcha.
waste your time with an unnecessary quarterback competition? This is dumb.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. All right. And then shifting over to the Jets, another former Steelers quarterback, Justin Fields, gets handed the keys for Gang Green. Also, Aaron Glenn, new head coach. What do you like about or do you like the plan they're putting in place here early on in this regime to kind of give Fields and the new regime a little bit of a runway? Can they surprise some people right off the bat? Or do you think that this is a flawed plan, that Fields maybe won't have the type of support he needs? Just throw it, kind of run across the gamut here. What do you think of their
I
initial
think
plan?
Aaron Glenn has, he has a lot of food on his plate to eat. And I think the first thing to do for him is, and I've said this multiple times, and I've said it on multiple platforms, man, he has to shock confidence back into this roster. You gotta understand, when Aaron Rodgers got here, man, they thought he was the white knight. They thought he was the Jesus coming through that door, and all the ills and bads of the New York Jets was going away. That didn't happen. Actually, it kind of exploded and it grew. Nevertheless, man, he's come. I think this whole team are underdogs, right? Because I think a lot of people are looking at him as an underdog. I think people are looking at this roster and trying to figure out, all right, this roster hasn't changed much, but we're looking at a running back in Breece Hall, who's pretty much was a sideline, but you couldn't find him on tape due to his lack of productivity.
Yeah.
And you also look at a frustrated Garrett Wilson, who I have so much respect for that young man, because a guy of his ilk and his caliber would have tore up the locker room and like, hey, man, I'm not happy, yada, yada. He did none of that. The kid just went to work, said the right thing in the media, and battled through it all. And so I'm a big fan of him. And nevertheless, man, you have an offensive line who I think is one of the strongest in the division, if not in the league, because you now you have the big kid out of Missouri, Mindu. You have Elijah Vera Tucker. You have Tippmann. You got Simpson, who I thought played his tail off last year. And now you have a future Pro Bowler in Olo Fashioner. So if you're going to put a young quarterback who a lot of people don't know what to think of for a multitude of reasons, well, you have an offensive line in front of him to back him up, right? To kind of give him that time and let him kind of have that maturation period in the new offense.
Yeah.
Defensively, man, one of the things I felt like the Jets didn't do was they missed on two things. I felt one, they needed a beef eater to help out Quentin Williams. Quentin Williams, 27 years old, never been in playoffs, and he's at the prime of his career. And I've seen this guy battle, man, and they need something to take that pressure off him, right? And the only way to do that is, you watch the Steelers get Yaha Black out of Iowa, put him right next to Cam Hayward, right? You also watch them get the other kid from Oregon, Derek Harmon, right?
I like that.
Take the pressure. Oh, what? Cam Hayward, right? Because they know Cam is old. Cam is still productive, still playing at a high level. But when you're playing in the trenches for that long, you're battling, taking on double teams, man, you're going to need some of these big uglies next to you to kind of fight with you. I don't think they help Quentin out in that regard, right? Especially when you have Jermaine Johnson coming off an injury, right? They just needed – I think they needed more firepower and more beef in the offensive line. And they didn't – I don't think they addressed that. Now, I know they signed Leonard Taylor and all these other guys, but the Jets were humming when they had JFM, when they had Sheldon Reagans. Those guys know how to eat up double teams and know how to be productive at their position. Aaron Glenn is going to need that. I appreciate him being a DB, getting multiple defensive backs, but the game's played up front, right? Those guys can't do their job if the guys up front can't hunt and be efficient and clog up gaps. So with all that said, man, I think Aaron Glenn really has to, one, get the confidence back into this locker room. Two, understand that Justin Fields is not going to be a world beater, so you can't put that on his shoulders, right? And you're going to have a run game that's going to have to now come alive again, because whatever you do with Breece Hall, me and Bart talking about all the time, you give that man the ball multiple times and put him in a scheme where he can now get to the edge, and our tight ends are blocking better for him, man. He can be dynamic, and he can be a legit weapon because he can run it and catch it. I think the offense has to go through Breece Hall, bottom line. They're going to have Breland Allen and all these guys. we have to get to those guys. The offense has to get through them, because I think it works both ways. It helps out the offensive line, helps out the offense, it takes the pressure off Justin Fields, and it helps out the defense. And then you build an identity through that. So hopefully that's the plan. That's how I would run it.
Man, awesome breakdown. Last one for me, Willie. The tush push. There was a lot of ado about nothing, it turns out. The tush push stays in the game, at least for now. Doesn't get enough votes for owners to ban the play. There's some people who say that there's injury concerns, or maybe that the play takes the fun out of the game. There's other people who say, let them run what they want. You have to stop it as a defense. As a former standout offensive lineman, Super Bowl champion yourself, how do you view it? Do you say leave it in and go stop it and make them run something else? Or would you rather see these O-linemen not have to dive into the muck all the time?
Yeah, we're born in the muck, so it's not an issue for us. But I do say this. I think, the Eagles made it a thing and it's their thing, but other teams have stopped it, right? I watched Buffalo do it. They got stopped. I watched Baltimore do it. They got stopped. So it's not like if you run this play, it's 100% completion. You still have to execute the play, and you need the talent to do it, right? Like it was great for Jason Kelce before he retired, because him and Hurts had their way of kind of executing it, and you're able to now see that you can run multiple plays off it too. It's not just a kind of a dive, forward dive. So you see the plays starting to evolve. I think it's just a lot of teams just frustrated. You have 4 downs. You need 10 yards to get another down, and when you run the tush push, you take 1 off, right? Because it started to be like, all I need is 9 downs. All I need 9 yards. Excuse me. So yeah. I think it's a whole lot of BS. To be honest, I think it's a waste of time. So
yeah, you usually don't see a portion of the league gang up on one team like that, but I think you're absolutely right, especially Sean McDermott in Buffalo, because like you said, even in the playoffs they were using it and trying it. So it's not like they weren't using it, but then they're sitting there saying like it's not a fair play and it risks guys' health. It seemed like sour apes in the end, but certainly interesting because of the success the Eagles have had with it.
Yeah, but Willie, I want to add this quickly.
Yeah.
The Eagles have the biggest offensive line in the league. So it fits to who they are and what they do. You have the biggest offensive line. Why wouldn't you have the tush push, right? You don't see any other team doing it. Like Green Bay, I think, has the second biggest line. They're not crazy about it. They barely. I don't think they do it. So it's just what the Eagles do, and they're successful with it. And if I had the biggest offensive line in the league, I would run the tush push too. It makes sense. You don't buy a tank to go. You don't buy a tank to go fast. You buy a tank to blow through things. You know what I mean? So
good point. And then it's interesting too, because you have the squat kings with Saquon and Hurts back there, and now AJ Dillon on the team as well. You could see the tush push even go to the next level.
They're going to start running multiple plays out of it, and I don't blame them. You just got to learn how to stop.
Yeah, right. Evolve it. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation as always. Again, everybody, it is the 11th annual Willie Colon golf outing, Monday, June 23rd at Canoe Brook Country Club in Short Hills, New Jersey, to benefit the Lupus Research Alliance. Give.lupusresearch.org to donate, to sponsor the event. Also, please support the Willie and Aikisha Cologne Foundation. That's Willie and Aikisha Cologne.org. They do great work in the community. He is the one and only Willie Colon. Thank you so much for being here, Willie. We always appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, Pat. Thanks, babe.